Okay, so pockets. If you're like me, you get really annoyed when your favorite outfit doesn't have pockets. Or you get really excited when somebody compliments your dress and you're like, look, 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 it has pockets. So a real question is why don't women's clothing automatically come with pockets? Men's clothing usually does. Why doesn't women's? Well, it's interesting, I think, because going back in time, looking at the 18th century, pockets were an accessory that was added on with the undergarments. So it was a separate thing. So today we think about pockets being like sewn onto the front of something or in the side seams or built into the garment. Well, back in the 18th century, the pockets were tied around the waist. And in fact, there's a nursery rhyme / song that maybe you know. I don't know, my generation and the generation before probably knows it more than like my kids' generation, but it goes, Lucy Locket lost her pocket, Kitty Fisher found it, not a penny was there in it, but a ribbon tied around it. And that's what they're talking about with these little pockets. And so they would tie around the waist. The skirt was engineered so that there was kind of an overlap at the side seam and you could pass your hand through the skirt and reach the pocket. So Lucy Locket, supposedly losing her pocket, it's come untied from her waist and Kitty Fisher found it. Now there's another version of this interpretation of this nursery rhyme that's a little more lucid, having to do with ladies of the evening. Google it, you can go there if you want. Okay, so 18th century, our clothes look like this, right? They're like over the top. I think the girls look like cupcakes. In fact, when I teach my class, I often refer to them as like cupcake decor. The way the embellishments put on looks like frosting on a cake. We go through the French Revolution and there is a very conscious throwing off of all things associated with the aristocracy. So the embellishment, the makeup, the really big hair, all of the things that was a mark of the wealthy suddenly becomes taboo as in France, the lower classes are history. Going from these lavish pannier, wealthy outfits, white makeup, huge hair, all kinds of extravagance, to being very stripped down and kind of a brand new version or reinterpretation of the classic Greek look. So if you're a fan of Bridgerton or Jane Austen, you may be familiar with the silhouette. In the span of 15, 20 years, we go from really, really lavish to really, really kind of stripped down and utilitarian-ish, softer. Makeup is gone, the big hair is gone. It's very, very natural. So these new dresses, they didn't have as much room in them for these pockets, and so with all the undergarments, the pocket situation kind of went to the wayside. But the women remembered having the pockets. Like we're talking like a generation of transition here. So they needed something. So they carried these little drawstring bags called reticules, which got nicknamed as ridicules because sometimes they were so little that you couldn't put much in them at all, and it was kind of ridiculous. Anyway, so the reticule is the answer to the pockets. Eventually, as we move into the Victorian era and the fashion changes again, the bags are still a staple. They also have things called chatelaines, which is basically like a brooch that you put on your waist or you pin to your outfit, and it would have all the important things you needed. Maybe some scissors and a needle case, keys, maybe a small bag to put some coins in. And so that served the purpose of the pockets as well. So by the time we get into the 19th century, many generations of women have passed, and so the pockets weren't a thing anymore. They weren't, they just kind of just evolved away. They start to make a comeback around the time of suffrage. So in the middle of, or the fight for suffrage, in the middle of the 19th century, we start seeing some shifting in gender roles, and that gets reflected in the clothing. And I'll cover that in another video because I think it's fascinating how clothing really follows feminist trends. When pockets start coming back, women start putting them subversively in their clothing to carry things like pamphlets and other materials to disperse to other women in the effort to get the vote. And so pockets become really taboo in clothes because disseminating this information was an issue that was going to overturn the status quo. So in the 19th century, women start rebelliously putting pockets in their clothing, particularly the suffragette suit, which is used for marching and protests, had lots of hidden pockets in it. That way you could carry your materials. Of course, here we are now in the 21st century, and we're still fighting for pockets. So I make it a point to subversively put pockets in lots of my clothes. Anyway, I have a video on that somewhere. Anyway, pockets.